so it turns out the Republican presidential primary is a disaster. Turns out it's a total mess. And I don't mean that in terms of the quality of the candidates running or the issues on which they're trying to appeal to voters. I mean, literally, the process is broken and ridiculous and unprecedented. And now, as of tonight, it is back in chaos. I had a completely different show planned for tonight. I was planning on talking about something totally different than this at this point in the show tonight. But then, tonight, after the close of business, the Republican Party and the CNN News Network decided that they were going to pull the silverware drawer out of the kitchen counter and shake it over their heads and announce a whole big new change in the way Republicans are trying to elect a presidential nominee this year. As of tonight, they have changed the next debate too. Just like they had to change the first debate, they have now changed the second one. And it's an important substantive change that is going to affect the way Republicans pick their presidential nominee. It's chaos. And we probably should have seen this coming when it became clear that so many Republicans were going to be running for president this year. Some of us kind of did see this coming. But there really are 17 major candidates running for the Republican nomination. And it's not, a few real candidates with real resumes and a real shot at it, and everybody else is just a joke. I mean, there really are 17 contenders for the nomination. It's a big field. It's a big field of serious candidates. It is historically the biggest field in any major party ever. And that presents some really serious challenges in terms of how to conduct that primary, right? How to do responsible polling of a field that large, how to make sure all the candidates get heard, they all get a fair shot, how to organize events at which all the candidates will be present. There are logistical and strategic challenges posed by the fact that the field's really big. But it should have been clear from the beginning that the solution to that big field problem was never going to be wishing it away, right? Just deciding that the field really isn't as big as it is. But that is what's happened. That's what the Republican Party and the Fox News Channel, and yes, CNN as well, decided to do. They just decided that they would deal with all the challenges of this big Republican field by just establishing a smaller Republican field. They would wave a magic wand, they would wield their influence through the debates, and just through the debate process specifically, and they would just decree that there were really only 10 serious candidates for the Republican nomination, and everybody else was something lesser. Why did they pick 10 specifically? No idea. It is a nice round number. So Fox was given the first debate by the Republican Party. After 17 major candidates declared that they were running for the nomination, Fox announced their first change to their debate plans. Instead of just having a regular presidential debate where the candidates would all be allowed to compete, Fox announced that they instead would have a real debate, and then they'd have a kids' table, a separate forum, some kind of other event in which they would, to which they would exile the candidates who Fox deemed not worthy of being in the real debate. Ultimately, that was not the only change that Fox News ended up announcing. They also announced the candidates would have to file financial disclosure statements that they didn't know they'd have to file before, and that may or may not have been a way to try to keep Donald Trump out of the first debate. Fox also announced at the very last minute a change in which polls they would be using to decide who'd be allowed into the debate. At the very last minute, they decided to exclude one poll, which would have shown less than 1 percentage point difference between the candidates who got in and the candidates who were kept out. So Fox had this very vague criteria that they said they were using around their debate. They kept it sort of deliberately mysterious, I'm thinking. And then all along, they kept announcing convenient rule change after convenient rule change, all along the process before they actually finally got to their debate the first week in August. But the most important change Fox announced was that first one, that I think of it as the original sin. This idea that there would be only one real debate that didn't include all the candidates. Some of the candidates would have to do some lesser thing because a news network had decided they weren't real candidates. I mean, the Republican Party saw Fox do that with the first debate. They had given the second debate to CNN. CNN, for some reason, decided that they would stick with Fox's idea of picking only 10 real candidates. They'd stick with Fox's idea of having a real debate and then this other kids' table event. Now, unlike Fox, CNN was not at all fuzzy about their criteria for what polls would count and how they would decide which candidates got into the real debate and which candidates they would keep out. CNN was very specific, very detailed, very explicit about what their criteria would be, but they did still stick with this idea that it would be CNN who would designate 10 real contenders for president, and they wouldn't let these other lesser candidates onto the stage to debate with the real candidates for president. Now, inevitably, because it is voters and caucus goers who are supposed to make these kinds of decisions and not news outlets, I think inevitably CNN's explicit, lengthy, detailed criteria that they announced well in advance, inevitably those criteria created what appeared to be fairly perverse outcomes for how the second debate was going to go. I mean, candidates who are now consistently losing in the polls, like really losing, candidates who are getting consistently 1% and 2% in the polls on a good day. Some of those candidates apparently have safe seats on CNN's debate stage. But other candidates who are polling great now, who are polling way ahead of those other loser candidates right now, those candidates weren't going to be allowed on CNN's debate stage. That started to become clear pretty early on in this process. And, I do not mean to disparage CNN in an ad hominem way. I have a lot of respect for CNN. They are a real news organization. I think they really wanted to seem like a real news organization here. They wanted to look objective and responsible here. CNN has been really on the defensive about what they have done wrong here. They've been saying over and over again that they would not change their restrictive plans for who they'd allow in this debate. They keep saying it with sort of increasing vehemence. On August 10th, CNN spokeswoman says no changes have been made to our previously announced debate criteria. August 26th, another CNN spokesperson says CNN published our debate criteria on May 20th. Federal Election Commission guidelines make it clear that these criteria cannot be changed after they have been published. We believe our approach is a fair and effective way to deal with the highest number of candidates we have ever encountered. That was kind of a doozy, right? That was CNN just last week, less than a week ago, saying not only are their criteria for this debate good criteria and fair criteria, but by law, they cannot change them. That was last Wednesday. 2 days later, CNN puts an exclamation point on that. This just a few days ago. This was Friday. CNN, quote, "Our criteria are totally appropriate, and we have been absolutely transparent about them throughout." I mean, by this point, it is the Carly Fiorina campaign that is complaining loudly, publicly, and repeatedly about CNN and what they're doing to the Republican debate. They're complaining about how Carly Fiorina is polling better than a lot of the candidates who are basically guaranteed debate slots under CNN rules, but she is set to be excluded, and that makes no sense. So CNN on Friday directly responds to her with a sort of backhanded smack. Quote, "If the Fiorina campaign had an issue with our criteria, they could have raised it when we published them in May. They did not. Revising the criteria on the eve of the debate at the demand of and solely for the benefit of one particular candidate is not something we have done in the past, and we will not do it now." That was Friday, CNN. We will not do it now. Now, though, it's Tuesday, and apparently now they will change the debate rules. CNN was sent this long, mad petition from the Carly Fiorina campaign just before 3 p.m. today, demanding that CNN change their rules to let Carly Fiorina into the CNN Republican debate 2 weeks from now. The Fiorina folks say they sent that to CNN just before 3 p.m. Less than 2.5 hours later, CNN caved. CNN announced, actually, we are changing our rules. After saying for weeks that they would not, that they should not, that they could not, it would be illegal for them to change their rules, now CNN is changing their rules.
Now, the Republican candidates are gearing up for their next big debate. It's right here on CNN. And tonight, there has been a very important amendment to the rules. CNN Politics executive editor Mark Preston is here with the details. Mark?
Well, Brianna, there has been a lot of talk about who would actually be in the top tier of the debate on September 16th at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. The question was, would there be the likes of a Carly Fiorina who could be added to the stage? Well, CNN has looked at the rules that were created back in May, and we've decided to amend them.
CNN announcing tonight that they have changed the rules about who will be allowed into the Republican presidential debate that they're hosting in a couple of weeks. They are changing the rules specifically to allow the likes of Carly Fiorina. They're allowing Carly Fiorina to be in that debate, which is very nice for the Carly Fiorina campaign. They're already sending out declarations of victory today, talking about how this is a great political battle that they've won, pressuring CNN to change the debate rules to let their candidate effectively compete for the presidency. But I got to tell you, CNN is still planning on having a kids' table debate and a real debate. They're just planning on letting 11 people into the real debate instead of 10 now. So the way they've made this rule change specifically to help that one candidate, well, that now raises the question of why they aren't going to do this for every candidate, for everyone still at the kids' table. Right? I mean, everybody still at the kids' table has reason now to launch their own pressure campaign to try to get CNN to let them into the primetime debate. I mean, if 10 isn't the magic irrelevant number anymore, if 11 is the magic irrelevant number now, why shouldn't 12 be the magic irreverent number, or 13? I mean, Rick Perry was the freaking governor of Texas for 14 years. You're not going to let him in? Bobby Jindal's the current governor of Louisiana. You're not going to let him in? What do you have against the South? Lindsey Graham is the home state senior senator from the first in the South primary, which happens right after Iowa and New Hampshire. South Carolina is right after that. You're not going to let him in? And on and on and on. CNN tonight, amazingly, after all of their defensive piety on this issue for weeks now, all this blowing smoke about how they're legally prohibited from changing these rules, and there's nothing wrong with these rules, CNN now announcing that they are bending their rules for one candidate. Why not the others? You know, there is a way out of this. I mean, the way to do this fairly, the way to fix what I think is an ongoing disaster here, to get rid of the ethical concerns, to get rid of the small d democratic concerns about a media outlet deciding who's a real candidate for president instead of voters being allowed that decision. I mean, there is a way to fix this easily. Don't just bend the rules about who's going to be consigned to the kids' table and who's going to be allowed into the real debate. Don't just bend the rules about who gets in and who doesn't. Just get rid of the kids' table idea altogether. And don't take it from me. Take it from the guy who right now is tied with Donald Trump for first place in Iowa, according to one recent poll. Ben Carson tonight putting out a statement praising CNN's decision to bend their rules to allow Carly Fiorina in, but also taking the next logical, ethical, and dare I say, leadership step. Quote, I would add that I urge CNN to revise their format to include all other candidates in the primetime debate as well. No qualified candidate should be excluded. The Republican Party and the American people are best served with an active, open, and transparent process. An all-inclusive debate format meets that objective. CNN announcing this sudden, last-minute change tonight is going to have a substantive, large impact on the course of the Republican presidential primary process. But to be clear, CNN did not fix the problem in that process tonight. They just broke their own rules to alleviate some of the pressure that they were feeling about this problem that they did not create, but that they are perpetuating for no good reason, and they're still perpetuating by doing a kids' table debate. It will be interesting to see if any of the other candidates follow Ben Carson's lead on this. But regardless, I mean, CNN, in the end, you've only got your reputation, right? And that's forever. There is still time to get out of the bias business in the Republican primary. There is still time to just kill the kids' table idea altogether. Seriously.